Hi, my name is Jamie Hale. I have red hair, black glasses, and a red beard. I am wearing a mottled green, red, and blue t-shirt. I have a headset on my head and a grey headrest behind it. In front of my mouth, there is a white straw on a black tube on which I am occasionally sucking. When I'm in my wheelchair, I stop being read as queer. I am often not even ascribed a gender, let alone a sexuality. Whether I'm he or she seems to depend on the day, the weather, I don't know. If he reads me as a man, or more often a boy, given the power differential he goes on to create, I am beloved by a certain kind of man. Straight himself, I'm not a threat to his pursuit of women, which he perceives as his primary objective. He scrubs my head with his fist in a friendly manner. He makes jokes about speeding or the women I'm out with, who are often my PAs and there to assist me. I shrug off the speeding jokes. I tell him I'm grateful to work with such highly skilled professionals, not allowing him to demean them. His racism is as blatant as his sexism, but my reply goes over his head. I'm an amusement to people in my wheelchair. I am a toy. I am not queer and I have no sexuality. I have become completely invisible. I'm not passing as straight, I'm just not being read. My wheelchair is visible to them, but nothing else is. I'm a cipher onto which they project their ideas of gender and disability. I am not a person. When I see other queer people, they often see me, even in my wheelchair. I haven't become invisible to them, though I have to everyone else. Something outs me. Being queer is legible in my manner. It is probably the same thing that gets me read as both male and female, or neither, that I speak the way I do, that I move through the world in this way. I'm invisibly gendered and I'm invisibly desexualized, and yet I am hypervisible in my disability. Or at least my wheelchair is. Whether I am visible within it is another question. Often my experience feels reduced to being that of wheelchair user. This is the politics of visibility. The hypervisibility of my chair, the invisibility of my existence. These combine, and I am described as visibly disabled. But who are we talking about when we talk about visible and invisible disability? More and more often, I hear disabled people being split into categories. The visibly disabled and the invisibly disabled, neurodivergent, chronically ill. We do it ourselves, but this division is forced and reified by people who don't call themselves disabled, whether or not they could. There's an often quoted statistic that 1 person in 5 is disabled. That probably comes from the Equality Act definition. Anyone living with cancer or HIV and anyone who has a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term negative effect on their ability to do normal daily activities. There's a 60-page guide to defining disabled. These 1 in 5 people that we talk about don't necessarily call themselves disabled. Disabled may seem a bad word. They might acknowledge they have a condition, but they don't use the word disabled. To me, disabled is a political word. I'm talking about people who face barriers to living their life, above and beyond those caused by whatever condition we have, barriers imposed, rebuilt, structured by society. My reality is that I cannot walk. The fact that I cannot get a train without assistance, enter many shops in my town, or perform on many stages, that's barriers. When I say that I am being excluded, I am saying that I am being disabled. To disable, an active verb. Society disables me when it doesn't provide wheelchair access. And I face other barriers too. Some that might be obvious when you look at me, and others that might not be. Attitudinal barriers about people with my diagnoses. And here, I'm not just talking about the first thing they perceive, which is my wheelchair. I'm talking about other impairments, if you will. Other disorders of function. These are such negative words. But when you talk about the visibly disabled and the invisibly disabled, you are looking, and I use the word look deliberately, privileging vision as this approach does, at me, and you are deciding you know what barriers I face. You are deciding that as the visibly disabled, my barriers are wheelchair access, and you don't think further. When people talk about invisible disabilities, they're often talking about pain and fatigue, chronic illness and neurodivergence. But these things aren't invisible if you want to perceive them. Calling them invisible continues to build a world in which we don't look for people or learn to read them. It builds a world in which we are making their access needs invisible because we haven't cared to understand how they might look, speak, or communicate. It builds a world where you didn't try to read the pain drawn on someone's voice and tone, or follow their enthusiastic and detailed digression onto a fascinating topic, where you are disabling people by making their needs invisible. More and more, I see places advertise or talk about disabled people, chronically ill, and neurodivergent people. The intent is good, but the outcome is disableist, because chronically ill people are disabled. Neurodivergent people are disabled. We need to be welcoming under that label, not categorizing further. Disabled isn't a bad word. When we say disabled people, neurodivergent people like myself are different, not disabled. We imply that disabled is a bad thing, defined by a medical categorization, instead of acknowledging that as neurodivergent people, we experience barriers as we move through the world. Similarly, if we define chronically ill as separate to disabled, we are ignoring all the access barriers in the way of chronically ill people, splitting us into a medicalized understanding of illness, not reckoning with the fact that chronically ill people have always been part of the disability community. Why? Well, we all face barriers imposed by society on top of those our condition creates. As a community, we have more in common than we do apart. I don't think disabled people can or should be split down the middle into categories of visible or invisible. I think these are fluid, mutate, overlap. I think breaking it down harms disabled people. I read stories of medical discrimination, one kind of barrier, from other disabled people, and I identify with them. I read stories of being told by strangers not to use mobility aids, another kind, and I identify with them. I read people talking about events not meeting their needs, yet another kind, and I identify with them too. The fact that people may have seen my wheelchair doesn't mean I'm treated better. It doesn't make my requirements simpler, more predictable, or easier to meet. It doesn't mean I'm treated worse. It does mean that I face a different set of barriers. We can't beat disabled discrimination unless we find ways of working together instead of apart. And we can't do that if we're acquiescing to the idea that there are two types of disabled. or that some people are different or ill, and that those people are not also actively experiencing disablism, actively being disabled. We can't do that. If visibility is the key divider when we could be working on common access needs, disabled people are far more the same than we are different. And there is a diversity of disablism. Specific instances will target one person more than another. Someone who is walking is far more likely to be falsely accused of inappropriate use of the adapted toilet than I. Someone walking is also far more likely to be able to climb a step into a building than I. But what do we have in common? We're both facing barriers. We're both being disabled. That person is facing strangers trying to prevent them from using an adaptation they need, the accessible toilet. I am facing strangers trying to prevent me from entering a building by designing and retaining that step. Does that mean people climbing the step are crossing a picket line? Are people entering spaces that physically exclude some disabled people, enabling and encouraging disablism? Whether it's toilets, attitudes, or steps, we are still being prevented from taking part in public life. And it's not visibility or invisibility that defines us most. It's that non-disabled people have decided to show us we're not welcome. We are all one community. Let's talk about the specific barriers that come with having or being thought to have specific conditions or impairments. But let's not let a simplistic reinforcement of two binaries become a key dividing line in our community. There are so many fights that are so much more important for us to have. We are all being disabled. We need to exist in solidarity. And we need non-disabled people to exist in solidarity with us. Thank you.